what EBT allows us to do is if we don't like the circuit that's running, not bother us, not blame ourselves, but essentially process it and switch it off. That means whatever aspect of your life that is not giving you the rewards that you truly want, when you come into EBT, you identify those circuits and turn them off. It's not about me or any guru or any therapist. It is about you having tools that allow your emotional brain to make your dreams come true.
You are here for a reason, but navigating this human life can be challenging. How do you care for your body, mind, and spirit to make the most of your time here on Earth? How can you harness your incredible human potential? In this podcast, we explore these questions and more to help you craft your best life yet. Welcome to I Am Human. Hello, humans. Welcome to another episode of I Am Human. I am your host, Dr. Yami, and I am so pleased to be with you today. I have an amazing episode for you, and I hope that you love it as much as I have enjoyed recording it. If you are new to the show, thank you so much for being here. I would love it if you subscribe to the podcast, but also if you rate and review it, and better yet, if you're able to share it with somebody that you feel would benefit from this information. I have so many episodes about so many different things. So if you were able to do that, that would be fantastic. So thank you so much. To be human means to develop survival circuits that maladaptively help us feel safe and secure. But to be human also means to rewire our brains so that we're able to connect with our joy and uncover our subconscious to bring us to more elevated brain states that help us live life in a more joyful and purposeful way. And my guest today, Dr. Laurel Mellin, is an expert in this area because she has created a technique called emotional brain training. So Dr. Laurel Mellin is a New York Times bestselling author, health psychologist, and founder of Emotional Brain Training, a new paradigm in healthcare directed at public health enemy number one, the stress hormone cortisol, which is the root cause of mental and physical health problems. Drugs, therapy, and mindfulness do not shut off the cortisol cascade, but she developed EBT during her 40 years as a professor in the School of Medicine at University of California, San Francisco, that uses simple emotional techniques to go to the root cause of health problems. Her new book, 1-2-3 Joy, Easy Natural Weight Loss that is scientific, proven, drug-free, and fun, shows readers how to use EBT as a healthy substitute for weight loss drugs by switching off stress chemicals. It is available now on Amazon. And Dr. Mellin also trains professionals in EBT and has an active EBT practice. And I'll say that I know that her book talks about weight loss, but in this episode, we mostly talk about addictive behaviors. And so we talked about my issues with overeating and using food as that reaction to my survival circuit. So in this episode, we're not really talking about body weight or body size. So just to give you that disclaimer on that the book is probably talking about that, but that's not what we discuss in this episode. So in this episode, we talk about stress and why we're so stressed so much as humans, how feeling stressed or having these negative emotions like depression or anxiety can actually become addictive to us, what the chemicals are that are involved in stress and how we typically respond to the feelings of stress, what self-regulation is, what emotional brain training is. We talk about these survival circuits, and we talk about how we can feel joyful and whether it's realistic to feel joyful all the time. And then we talk about the greater benefits of finding our joy, both for the world and spiritually. It's really a fascinating discussion. And based upon this conversation that I had with Dr. Mellin, I'm actually going to try the techniques. I'm going to read the book because I haven't had a chance to read it yet. And I'm going to experiment and try these techniques and see if it helps me this time in my life, being a very busy entrepreneur with a lot of stress and a lot of overthinking and emotional stuff that I get trapped in. So I'm going to see if it works for me. I'm very excited about this, but I know that you're going to love this episode. There's a lot of great things that she said and some things that she was able to say in a way that I'd never really thought of it before. So I think that you're going to get a lot out of it, even if you don't feel like you need these techniques. But it sounds to me like the majority of us would probably benefit from learning these techniques, not just from some of these addictive behaviors, but even for relationships, the way that she describes it. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you so much. And thank you for coming back week after week to listen to these episodes. And now let's welcome Dr. Laurel Mellin. The information on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not meant to replace careful evaluation and treatment. If you have concerns about your health or well-being, please consult a healthcare professional. This podcast episode contains sensitive topics that may be triggering to certain people. Listener discretion is advised. Dr. Laurel Mellin, welcome to I Am Human. I know we're going to have a fantastic conversation today. I'm so excited to get into it. You have decades and decades of experience, and I know that you are going to bring a lot of value to my audience today. So let's start with something that we experience a lot of, and that's stress. Why are we stressed all the time?
Well, we're stressed all the time because what's coming into our brain from the world is not consistent with what we're designed to handle. It's just overwhelming. The speed of change, the overload, the temptations, it's all going so quickly that we can't really process it. And then once it gets to the state of stress overload, we go into something called allostasis, which we don't even know about. Most people know about homeostasis, but there's a whole nother animal called allostasis, which has a whole different kind of circuit in your brain that causes us to careen out of control and have our thinking brain go offline. And then we are really overwhelmed. And because there's no shutoff valves on those circuits, essentially, we don't know how to stop it. And so we have to eat, drink, spend, obsess, or do whatever we have just to avoid feeling horrible. And that's called stress overload. And that's what most people have right now.
Yeah, that seems to make a lot of sense. You're almost referring to that primitive brain, that animal brain of ours that just wants to protect us and wants to try to make us feel good. But one of the things that you wrote about, which I found very intriguing, is that stress or even other what we would call negative feelings like depression, anxiety, they can be addictive. Can you explain this?
Right. Okay. So what happens is when we are there's 5 different levels of stress in the brain. One is where the top of the brain is in charge and we're in joy and we're of purpose. And then as we get more stressed, the brain automatically and universally puts another brain area in charge that's faster and quicker and more dysregulated and more extreme, but at least it saves us from a lion that's trying to bite us. There's only 2 of these brain states that are reward driven. One of them is brain state 1, where we're all about higher purpose. You know, we're doing something for authenticity or vibrancy or integrity or spirituality or freedom. And so we get those beautiful surges of neurotransmitters. The only other state that is actually reward driven is brain state 5, because the brain is protecting us from physical injury. So we get the endorphins going. Once you've got those endorphins going, you've got a strong memory. You've got a circuit, what's called the survival circuit, that wants you to repeat that pattern. And so you get addicted because you get a dopamine high, and because the stress of that state also takes the thinking brain offline, so you don't have any good ideas of how to get out of that spot if you can't process your emotions.
Oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. You're basically stuck in this cycle of rewarded negativity. I can't remember what the song is. It feels so good to feel so bad. It's some song that I grew up with in the late 80s, early 90s, but that makes a lot of sense that in both of those extremes, one more of the positive feelings and one of the negative feelings, that you're being rewarded by these chemicals. I never even thought about it that way. So tell me a little bit more about what are these chemicals that are involved in stress. And you kind of already mentioned how we typically respond, how we've learned to cope with these things that are more maladaptive, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Talk about the chemicals and what, as humans, we typically do when we're feeling this.
Okay, well, that's a good question. Just even think about obesity. Obesity essentially is a stress symptom of stress chemicals. So what happens is when we get stressed, we activate a circuit in our amygdala, in our emotional brain, and essentially whatever is the strongest circuit that we used before for that particular situation gets activated without our permission or approval. All we know is we have this chemical surge. And there's actually three things that happen. The amygdala in our emotional brain has the circuit in it. That's the controller. It activates it. And what happens is we get that cascade of cortisol, which, for example, makes us hungry and then drains another center, which is the reward center. So it goes stress, reward, and habit. So the stress amygdala gets activated with the circuit. If we don't catch it and process our emotions, we are going to drain our neurotransmitters and our serotonin. And at that point, we are both stressed and hungry, or wanting a drink, or wanting something to satisfy ourselves because we're unrewarded. And of course, the world gives us lots of options to feel better in the moment, because we don't want a nice little surge of feel-good neurotransmitters that's healthy. We want a dopamine blast at that point because we feel out of control. So the third part of this stress triangle in our emotional brain that doesn't listen to thoughts, only emotions, is the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus adapts to even our worst habits, okay? It's not helpful to us because it says, okay, if you're going to eat, drink, spend, or not get sleep, or not exercise, or whatever, we'll adapt. And so it gets wired for unhealthy habits. And at that point, turns on the stress response, we get into chronic stress. And essentially, we are wired in all three of those areas. The stress center has circuits in it that make us stress for no reason. The reward center gets used to abnormal highs in dopamine to offset the abnormal lows. And there's something called the pain-pleasure pathway in the brain. So once we don't just eat apples because we're hungry, but eat apple pie or whatever, what happens is we get this big dopamine high, we get a crash, we don't know what to do, and we have to go back to the addiction. And that's the addiction cycle. The problem is that the habit center also colludes here because really it will do anything. It'll give us high blood pressure, it'll give us diabetes, it'll give us depression, and then it locks in and says, that's normal, everybody. That's what we're going to do. So what we do in this method, emotional brain training, is we say, in the moment, get out of stress. And when you have that amygdala activating a circuit that sends you into a false high, numbness, or a low, because you can experience stress anyway, you switch it off. Using emotional tools, you just switch it off. You make that your priority and activate a healthy, natural high. And then, but you have to correct those errors in your amygdala because you are overreacting. And also with the reward center, you are used to being at such a high level of dopamine that you are draining the healthy chemicals that you have. And you are going to be more and more depressed, more dependent, and be at more risk of suicide. And then go to the habit center and say, gently, now that you're feeling less stressed, more rewarded, gently change your behaviors so that it feels natural to do it and it's sustainable. So essentially, what we have in this country is people who are so stressed out that in their emotional brain, all three of those major structures have been harmed. And this method, emotional brain training, fixes all three of them. It rewires the overreactions and underreactions. It normalizes the dopamine, and it gently, after people stop feeling so stressed and start feeling really rewarded, gently makes changes in the habits that are sustainable.
That makes a lot of sense. So my substance of choice is food for myself. And I find that my biggest trigger, there's two of them, but the biggest one is fatigue. So I'm a type A worker, person. So I'm doing all the things, a million projects. And I guess I've interpreted it as in the evening, I'm so tired. There's part of me thinking I really should continue to do work. I should continue to work on projects, but I don't want to. So food tends to be my favorite thing to help me calm down and feel more relaxed. And it makes sense what you're saying, that once you get into that, it's like nothing else seems pleasurable anymore, right? Because you're using all of the dopamine for that thing. So I can't, there's been times in my life where I couldn't think of anything else in the entire world that sounded as pleasurable as eating. Not a friend, not my children, not being on a beach somewhere. Like food was the thing. So is that kind of what you're describing?
That is called a survival circuit, which has been really studied quite a bit by Ledoux at NYU, and we at UCSF with EBT, we have studied it as well, but we have a method for changing it. A survival circuit is the number one villain in the world. It is the circuit that gets formed sometime in life. I had a food circuit as well. So you have a food circuit. Okay. And when it's not activated, you're sensible about food. I mean, it's not a big deal. You're not on edge all day. But the moment it gets activated, the legions of chemicals that it causes and the amount of stress, even though you may not feel stressed, you might feel very calm, but it drives you right to the overeating. So let me describe how mine was encoded. I was 11. I was bullied at school. I came home and I was ashamed. I didn't know what to say. My mother was there, but I didn't know how to cope. I was overwhelmed, and I reached for some cinnamon rolls and I ate them. So and then I felt ashamed about that. And part of it is the shame people feel about, wait, this is ridiculous. Overeating is caused by a circuit in the unconscious mind, and current therapies are not treating those circuits. Instead, they put people on drugs. Okay. So, but I was ashamed, and my father had diabetes, and I knew that food was very important, and I felt terrible. But what I didn't know neuroscientifically, because it wasn't discovered until 2010, is that I had a survival circuit. And here's how it works. If you're in a stress response, which typically now is from psychological stress, and who isn't stressed out? So you imagine you've got this big old fight or flight circuit going. And here I am, 11 years old. I go in and I don't know, I'm overwhelmed. I reach for the food. I had a little tiny food circuit. Food didn't really matter that much to me at all. But because they co-activate, this is called associative learning, they form one major gargantuan circuit. If I don't process my emotions, if I went to my mother and I processed my emotions, that circuit would not have been encoded, because the circuit stays labile until you go to sleep. And then it gets encoded in long-term memory. And once it's there, you cannot get rid of it unless you stress activate it and stay present to your emotions. And when you do that, it opens like a flower and you can begin to weaken and rewire it. So then I wake up the next day and I have a fight or flight drive to overeat. And these survival circuits that have been so well studied are the root cause of most human suffering and addiction. You can be addicted to anything. Let's say that happened for me again. And I was at 11 and I didn't reach for the food, but instead I went numb. I could get a fight or flight drive that the brain telling me I get my survival, my existence, my power, my love, my everything from going numb. So it's not just about a habit. It can be anything that co-activates. It changes only with rewiring, not by drugs and not by, or medications or even cognitive therapies. It's emotional.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Well, I'm not sure exactly when mine started. I just know it's been there for a really long time, probably since the single digits for sure. But tell me a little bit about, let's take a step back and talk about self-regulation. What is self-regulation?
Okay. Well, self-regulation is an interesting concept because it is essentially you're using your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, your neocortex, your prefrontal cortex, to attune to your emotional brain. Because the emotional brain controls regulation. It's in the circuits in the amygdala. But you can't, the brain has no feelings. So the only way you feel what's going on in your emotional brain is to connect with your body. So in emotional brain training, you learn from the start, stop thinking, stop making lists. Throughout the day, you wake up in the morning, and because joy is a sign of optimal physiology, that's the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio. He changed homeostasis, so you can't just be relaxed. In order to turn off the stress chemicals, you have to be in an elevated state of positive emotions. just for a moment, not all the time. You don't want to be super glued there. So essentially, what we're doing is using a thinking brain. You wake up in the morning and you say, what am I doing with my day? And I can imagine with all the things you do, you already have 15 things you have to do before you even get out of bed. You don't do that. You say, the only thing that really matters is my physiology. In other words, my mindset. If I take care of my brain, then everything else is going to go well. So you say to yourself, what am I doing with my day? I am creating joy in my life. I'm not waiting for it to happen. It's a brain state, and I'm going to create it today. So it's not happiness. Happiness, this is not positive thinking. This is physiology. Physiology, when you're really in that grounded state, you're connected to your body. You're aware of the downside of life, and you accept the essential pain of life. And you open your heart to the goodness of the higher order rewards. So it's a gritty joy. It can be a happy joy. It can be a loving joy, but it is definitely grounded in reality. And so you say, okay, when I'm feeling disconnected, I'm going to take and use the emotional tools. It takes 1 to 3 minutes, and I'm going to clear my stress throughout the day. So I would guess that you have 2 things going on. Number one, that throughout the day, if you developed a habit of clearing the stress, it only takes 1 minute. If you're doing mindfulness, it takes 15 to 30. 1 minute, and you get a natural high. Throughout the day, between patients or between projects, just the 1 minute. When you got home at night, you biochemically would be at a higher state. But let's say you weren't. Then what you'd say is, when it happens, when you go to food, don't try to control yourself, because the survival circuit will not allow it. Okay, it just won't allow it. So say to yourself, hey, I'm eating right now, and that's okay because it's a circuit, and when I get around to it, I'm going to rewire that circuit. And then let's say you go the next day and you go to the EPT, and there's a person there listening to you, and you learn how to rewire the circuit. And all you have to do, this is what's so uncanny about the beauty and the simplicity of the unconscious mind. It's just our shared genes. If you decided that you wanted to have an fMRI and you wanted to find the circuit that made you overeat, a brain scan would not do it. What will do it is your own natural brain. All you have to do is bring up the thought of that eating episode the night before and start talking about it. Once you talk about it, you're going to create a lot of stress, which is what you need to rewire it. And you're going to unlock the bottom of your brain, more toward the reptilian brain where that exists. That circuit is going to open up because, number one, after you complain, I eat too much or whatever that is, I'm out of control with my food. You immediately express, after complaining, everything your mother told you not to do, you express anger in a very productive, safe way quickly. And you essentially say, I feel angry that I'm out of control. I can't stand that. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. About 6 of those. What happens is you clear so much stress that it's safe to feel. If you didn't express that little burst of anger and tried to just go into your feelings, the sadness would go into depression. The fear would go into panic or anxiety. And the what did I do? The guilt would go into shame. Basically, you'd be shut down. And you'd have to go eat to cope with it. So this simple process allows you to express your anger first, so it's safe, sad, just one, sad, fear, and then you say, well, why do I do this? And your unconscious mind, where this is stored, opens up, and it floats up to your conscious mind, and you say, oh, I get my safety from eating food when I have nothing else to do, or whatever it is. But the exact words that are in your unconscious mind, you need to know. Because once you know exactly what that message is, all you do is hit it with the opposite message, and the brain can't have 2 opposite messages at the same time, and it rewires the circuit. So you can't even do that with the brain scan or with psychotherapy. It's absolutely something that anyone can learn how to do and can be life-changing.
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is fascinating, but I need to go back to something that you said that kind of blew my mind. Because I think maybe intellectually I knew this, but nobody had ever said it this way. And suddenly it makes so much sense. You said the brain has no feeling. The brain can't feel. all our feeling is coming from our body, which makes so much sense because we are continuously disconnected from our bodies. Like we're always disconnecting ourselves from, but really everything is, we're just interpreting those chemicals, those sensations, and then we're having thoughts about it. But I never really heard anybody put it that way. And that blows my mind. That's amazing. So what you're trying to say is in order for this to work, we have to connect to our bodies. We have to be able to let the emotion process, because most of us have learned that emotions are bad, right? Especially anger. And especially women, I would think. We've been told that that's bad. We should not feel that way. I know I was raised that way. And so what you're saying is we have to let it process through. And then once we let that come out, our subconscious is going to give us the answer that we need to be able to rewire that circuit.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And that's what when I'm talking about expressing anger for about 20 seconds, and then sadness, fear, and guilt. And I say to my participants, because all of EBT is in groups, the emotional brain is the social brain because it wants to be connected to people. And you can use our app and do great work. But the survival circuits that really bother us, think of the brain as a chest of drawers. Okay, there's all the memories from when you were in brain state 1 are located here and there. When you're in brain state 1, all of them are activated with state-specific memory. If you want to change the binge, if you want to change the fact you get in arguments with your spouse, or that you shut down and procrastinate, they're all in the 5th drawer of the brain. So with most methods, what happens is they're cognitive. So you analyze what's going on here, and you don't even touch the circuits. And if you don't touch the circuits and rewire them, they keep getting stronger. So essentially, you can use the app and rewire a lot of circuits, every once in a while a 5 circuit, but a lot of 4 circuits. But so what we do is say, you know what, the action is the 5th circuit. So we're going to teach you from the start how to get all the way down to the bottom of your brain, activate what bothers you the most, clear that circuit, and then the rest will be easy to do. So essentially, that's what we want, is to say stress is good for you, because if you are in stress, you activate those circuits. And if instead of disconnecting from your body or judging yourself for being stressed, you say, oh, what's my stress number? And what am I going to use the tool? And you can use it on your own, but also every day of the year at Emotional Brain Training, we have a certified EBT provider there who will listen to you. Because what happens is, and we also have a system so that if you're in a group, you have confidential 5-minute listening experiences to the people in your group. So you have safety and confidentiality. When we're listened to, when we use EBT, we get to the addictive circuits, the ones that are really harming us. And that's what we want to do. So that's why there's no substitute really, even with EBT, for people helping people help themselves, that we need loving connection. And one of the ideas is that if you have a spouse, get your spouse into EBT, because then, like with my husband, we've only been together 11 years. And the first time we met, we knew that we'd spend the rest of our lives together. We got lucky. But he had been in a difficult marriage and he didn't have communication skills. And I don't know if we would be together and as in love as we are if we didn't have an EBT. From the beginning, I said to him, you have to learn these skills because, I'm kind of a case, I mean, I get upset at times and, I'm not going to take your temper, or you're not going to take my being impossible. So you learn that as a couple, that the only brain state where you're really intimate is 1. After that, you're functional. And here, people treat each other like objects. So to help your marriage grow, that means emotional connection, sensual, sexual pleasure, and loving companionship where you're laughing together and that sort of thing. You've got to stay emotionally alive. So I'll say to him, hey, I'm at 5. Would you listen to me for 5 minutes? And he knows he can't give me advice, which is really hard, but he learned that because when he didn't do it, I really told him, you have to play by the rules of the emotional brain. He listens to me, and then he gives me some kind words back. So there's always a connecting message back. If you're in a relationship right now, and you think that other person, that your relationship's dead, or the other person was the worst mistake you've ever made, even if they won't go to EBT, you get the skills to do that. And what happens is, as you start doing this differently, you'll set limits with that person, and the old relationship is over, and you begin to see emotional evolution and a depth in each other that you haven't seen before.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so it can work to strengthen our relationships, improve our relationships. Obviously, for overeating and binge eating, which is my struggle, but it sounds like for really any other addiction. So, can you use this for any substance addiction, or is there some things that it's more difficult to use for?
It's used by for any substance addiction. If you have, our medical director is an addiction doctor, and Michelle Welling. And, so we know that even the people that are going for 30-day programs, they need comprehensive care. And I want to just mention that the first thing you do when you come into EBT is you take the EBT brain map and you figure out what are the circuits that are blocking your joy. Because the natural way of the brain is to get in joy. When you get through stress, you come back to joy. And so you identify your set point. The goal is always the same, no matter who you are, set point 1. In other words, the default position of the brain is to go back to a state of connection. And so, but you do, if you are at set point 5, not just a few, most people have 4 survival circuits at set point. But let's say your brain is just locked into a set point, then you need comprehensive care. You need comprehensive medical care, you need psychotherapy, and you need EBT. So the difference is what your set point is. But either way, you got to go back to basics. Why do we have the addictions? Self-regulatory failure. Essentially, you get down to 5 and nobody's there to give you love. No one's there to work it through with you, and you don't have those emotional skills. So what it means is whatever you're doing, you bolt on EBT, and then you go to the root cause. Be able to clear those survival circuits. Be able to, no matter what comes your way, that you can work through your feelings quickly, not in hours, but in minutes, and find your way back to a loving place where you can be your best self.
So for some things, you may need to do make additional tools, additional techniques, but it's never wrong to use EBT. And in fact, EBT can help you progress even faster, is what I'm hearing.
That's right. We suggest that all therapists, in fact, ask your therapist if they are certified in EBT. We are certifying therapists right and left, because the fact is the cognitive method is no longer working. If you look at the health literature, what you see that about in 1980, all of a sudden things weren't working so well. In other words, the stress levels were higher than cognitive methods could control. And that's been proven, again, by NYU. They compared, what do you do? They said, why do we have all these mental health problems? Why do we have all these chronic diseases? If CBT, if cognitive behavioral therapy actually worked, we wouldn't have them. So they did this great study. You would love this. What they did is they brought people in, they taught them how to use the best cognitive technique, and they encoded a fear memory. They had them come back the next day, and one of them used the cognitive technique with the fear memory and in low stress situation. It worked like a charm. Then they put them in the moderate stress levels common in 2013, which is much lower than now. And what happened is they totally failed the stress test. In fact, you can look up the article. It's called Cognitive Methods Fail the Stress Test. Essentially, the thinking brain's offline, the emotions are gnarly, and it does not turn off the stress response. So that's what we're aiming at, is turning off that stress response and helping people do it in a quick way.
Are there any people who don't have these level 5 circuits and they're just like perfectly self-regulated? Does that kind of person exist?
I think it's about between 10 and 15% of the population, and I wouldn't want to be them.
Explain why.
Oh, if you have adversity insufficiency, you're not the same person. Adversity is what people need to mature. And so if you think about it, if you have adversity insufficiency, you have never learned to be emotionally naked with yourself. You've never learned who you truly are, because it's only in those moments of overload where you're climbing your way to find out, what should I do? Who am I? What am I going to do? That number one, you do find unconditional love for yourself. You find the deepest spiritual and emotional connection. And it doesn't come from people who are just hanging out being comfortable. So the hard part is if you're wealthy, if you have a lot going on in your life that makes you safe and comfortable, you're at risk because you can attach to being comfortable. And comfort doesn't buy you joy. What buys you joy is going forward and figuring out how you can make the world a better place. And when you start trying to make the world a better place, people are going to reject you. You're going to find things that you're not so good at. You're going to have to push yourself. And we all need that dopamine push for higher purpose to evolve and to find out our true selves. And so essentially self-knowledge and compassion for others comes from going through pain ourselves.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful. That's amazing. So it's through that challenge, it's through that grit, through those difficult experiences that we develop that empathy and compassion and make the world a better place. So interesting. All right. Well, let's talk. One of the things that I was curious about, and it sounds like this isn't what you were saying anyway, but is it realistic or even possible to try to feel joyful all the time? Or what really is our goal here when we're using emotional brain training?
Our goal is to be emotionally alive and moving along in our development. And what we don't want to do is when people say to you, you've got to stay mindfully aware and conscious and control. And if you do that, even if you have no survival circuits in your brain, the bottom of your brain records what's real in life. And the reality for us is always changing. So the reality in our environment is different today than it was even 5 years ago. And so essentially, if you ignore the realities of the stresses of life and just zone out and try to stay in joy, you will miss the boat because your set point of your brain will get lower and lower because you're not going down into stress, saying what's really going on here and changing the circuitry. Joy, even a tiny bit throughout the day, little bits of it turn off what is the HPA axis, or in other words, the stress response. Not a calm mood, not relaxation, that spark of joy. So all you want is that spark of joy. Like I'm feeling it now. You can tell I'm working hard. I'm trying to find how to describe this to you, right? And I have a glow all over my body. And that's the joy response. So what you're doing is hoping and praying that you have a few moments at 5 every day. But when that happens, you're not going to say, oh my gosh, the roof is caving in. Nothing's ever going to work. I'm the worst person on earth. I really hate myself. And I'm here. I'm supposed to love myself. What you're trained in EBT to say is, oh, moment of opportunity. All those circuits at the bottom of my brain that are making me stressed out are opening like flowers. And all I have to do is reach for my app because I know how to do this now. I've been trained, and spiral up and clear away that clutter and find a new way of living so I'm even more up to date with who I am and how the world works.
Wow. Would you be able to give a little example of how it would work? Like, is it like a prompt or like a little mini meditation?
Yeah.
What is it that the app is helping you do in these moments?
Okay. Well, what it's helping you do is the first thing you do is identify your level of stress. Okay. And you can use any of the tools because there's 5 different tools. But with our new app, because we were given a gift of $500,000 from a grateful patient who said, everyone on earth should have these tools. It saved my marriage. It saved my health. So we upgraded it and we said, what do people really want? They want to be in control. They don't want those survival circuits bothering them. And they have no time. So our latest app called Spiral Up, actually you go there and you have a choice. If you have 1 minute and you're at work and you don't want to feel, you just want to really quickly pass through that resiliency pathway in the brain, you push number 1, okay? And if you have a little time where you could feel your feelings, maybe 2.5 minutes, and use any of the 5 tools, you push on 2. And if you say, hey, this is trauma work here, or this is a drive I don't want, you push on number 3 for deep work, and it takes you right along that pathway to make that revision. All of them end up at that sweet spot of brain state 1 where you get that little glow in your body and you focus on your body and you say, wow, I can feel the difference. It's had a physiological effect. But mainly, most of the time, 80% of the time in one study we did on EBT, is people use the tool for brain state 4. It's called the cycle tool. It rewires circuits. It's the one that opens up the unconscious mind. And again, it is so simple. Again, like right now, what can I do? My husband, I'll do it right now. Can I do one for you to demonstrate?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay. So in the method, there are 23 steps. That's why we use the app. They're very precise. There's a lead in, the beginning of a sentence. Then you pause and you turn your attention to your body because you're reading your unconscious mind. The conscious mind is not what we're dealing with here. It's the unconscious. And then you go to the next one, step by step. It's the same for everyone, for all problems. So I'm just going to start with one. The situation is, that's the first lead in. I'm going to pause and I'm going to say, I'm going to try to get myself stressed. So I'm not going to express feelings. I'm just going to complain. The situation is, my husband has been in a bed for 8 months and his whole entire health is suffering and he may never get out of it. Notice how I just stopped after about 5 sentences. Pause. Then I connect with my body again because I want to know what's going on in my emotional brain, the wisdom of my emotional brain. What I'm most stressed about is he could die. That just came up from my body. Okay. Now I'm going to stay on that topic because there's a circuit now activated in the bottom of my brain, and I'm going to find out what's amplifying my stress. We can't take away the stress of life, but we can take away the suffering. I know that my emotions are going to go flat now if I don't have EBT. So I've got to use the anger cycle, the anger procedure to clear it, because anger is the only negative emotion associated with power. And it works beautifully here. Okay, he could die. And then I'm going to use just that one statement. Okay, I feel angry, he could die. And now I'm about brain state 3. I got to go lower. I can't stand it, he could die. I hate it that he could die. And then I've got to get into a little bit of a rage. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it, I really, really hate it. Okay. Now, that just works. My brain opens up. It both activates the circuit and dispels the stress quickly. And now I'm connected to my body. I'm connected to my body. And I just have one deep sadness. So if you're in a relationship where people talk too much, or they go on and on about their feelings, have your partner learn EBT because it only takes 5 minutes. It's very efficient. My one deepest sadness is I would be so alone. And then I feel it until it fades. Not, I feel sad, I feel sad, I feel it. Just feel it in your say. So I'm connecting to, waiting till it has to fade. And you have to be trained to let it fade. Don't get into thinking. My one deepest fear is, if I don't resolve this, is that I'm going to be a nervous wreck and not able to enjoy every minute he has left on this planet. Okay. Now, if I had a circuit down there amplifying my stress, immediately my brain would go to it. I'd find out what that unreasonable expectation is, and I'd change it. That's called reconsolidation. Right now, I don't have a circuit there, and my brain will take me up for optimal self-regulation, not to rewire, but simply to feel better, to grateful. Under the negative feelings are the positive. I feel grateful that I met this incredible human being that's the love of my life. And then happy. I feel happy that he's so much better. I feel secure that I'm being a loving force in his life. And I feel proud that I have stayed the course during the difficult times. Okay. So you can see I am chemically affected in my whole body, but I'm not done yet. And what I need to do is 2 things. If I'm doing deep work, if I pushed on number 3, I would ask myself 3 questions. Because during COVID, the people that did well were people that had a positive self-concept. And so when we've just been in stress, it's an opportunity to clear out the negative self-concept. So I ask 3 questions. I say to myself, who am I? Just basically, I'm a loving person. Keep it really simple. It's not who you are, what you do. It's your essence. I'm a loving person who tries. And then say, what is the challenge I'm facing right now? The challenge I'm facing right now is my husband is quite ill. And then identity. Say, Who do I want to be? There's people around the world that are facing sicknesses in their loved ones. Who do I, little Laurel Mellin, who do I want to be? And you pause and you say, I want to be a person who goes the extra mile to love. What you've done right there, right when your brain is open to change, is you've upgraded your self-concept and your aspirations. And then you finish it. And this is only with the deep work. Normally we leave those out because it only takes 1 to 3 minutes. But you always go forward. And one of the things that's sad about some of the cognitive methods or the mindfulness methods is, how you behave is really important. It affects your whole health status. And so always with EBT, after you clear the emotions, you move right on to saying, okay, now I know who I am. I'm not going to do too much or too little. I say to myself, I expect myself to do the best I can to, and something will come to your mind, to continue to love him and take care of myself as well, because it's not easy on me. Okay. You say whatever comes from your body, the wisdom of your body when you're at brain state 1. If you did that when you were down here, it wouldn't be very wise. But now this beautiful wisdom comes out. And then right then, you've just committed to doing something. And so you're going to get a stress response. And instead, you give yourself some positive thinking. What are the positive, powerful words I need to hear? I can do that. But this is the most important thing, Dr. Yami, that in life, we need to evolve. We have a society right now that is using medications and technology to distract themselves from evolving. And that makes us very, very vulnerable because we're dependent on the external forces, not the internal brain forces. And so when you go forward to go forward with something, you always face the hard part. What is the essential pain of life that I need to face and accept in order to move forward with grace and ease? The hard part is I'm not in complete control. It could be anything like I'm not perfect. I'm not in complete control. Some people may reject me. I have to give at a deeper level. But the realities that mature us, we face every time and feel and accept and evolve in EBT. And so, I'm not in complete control of what's going to happen. But if I can face that and stay present to myself, the earned reward is always higher power. It's always that elevated reward of purpose. Because in the brain, if you bring to mind when you're not in stress, something like, I'm doing it for spirituality, I'm doing it for integrity, I'm doing it for authenticity, it goes right into the septal region of the brain, and it shuttles it down to the nucleus accumbens in the reward center of the emotional brain. And you get this beautiful surge of neurotransmitters that allows you to do anything. You are unstoppable. So my reward for me in doing the best I can is vibrancy, healthy with a zest for life, integrity, doing the right thing, and spirituality, aware of the goodness of life. So when I say those words, I get that glow in my body, and then I say, oh, I can feel it in my body. I just treated myself medically because I'm not the same person chemically. I did it.
Wow. That's incredible. Well, I'm telling you, I'm downloading that app immediately because I need this. It feels to me like it's a way to help you connect to your higher self, the person you want to be, the person that you aspire to be. And if I can clarify a little bit, when you were talking about going through those stages, if you get stuck in that 4th or 5th stage, I imagine what could happen when you're feeling some of those emotions is maybe you start to blame your partner, or you become to get angry at your partner or something like that, instead of moving through the emotions and getting up to those higher stages. Could that be a possibility, and why that can affect relationships?
EBT, it requires training. You come in and you learn in a small group, not only from the app, but the course that we have. So you learn how to train your brain that the most important thing is your brain state. And if you are not at 1 or 2, it's not about your partner, it's about your brain state, and you can change it. The other part of this is how remarkably safe EBT is. And again, having studied EBT for more than 40 years, what I appreciate and I'm in awe of, absolute awe of, is the grace of the emotional brain. And it is the seat of the soul. Let me just give you an example. Any memory that you do not have the skills to emotionally process will stay gone. It will not show up. So essentially, it's not going to come up if it's too much. And essentially, if you're trained in EBT, let's say all of a sudden you start to blame, you're not told psychologically that you should analyze what your problem is or what your issue is. It's all physiological, not psychological. And so you say to yourself, well, if I'm blaming him, what number am I? And if I'm at 4, I'm not intimacy material right now. And so we form these little groups over the telephone across the mile so people get support for this new paradigm in healthcare.
Yeah. No, I was saying that if you're not using EBT, when you're stuck in that 4th or 5th state, I could imagine that that's why it triggers fights, is because you're almost reacting to that state that you're in. And that's what's helping you feel better, is like you want to lash out against somebody whenever you're feeling bad like that. It makes sense why that would happen. So then using EBT helps you realize you just have to flow through those states and get, to that one that, and we're always told, gratitude helps neutralize so many things, but it's really hard sometimes when you're so upset or feeling like you're in that fight or flight mode to get to that state of gratitude. But you're showing us a way that we can get there and access that joy.
And also celebrate the goodness of life, that as much as we are spiritual beings, we are of the body, and the body is really messed up because the genes that we have gotten are meant for hunter-gatherer times, when what it does is it takes psychological stress and way overreacts to it. So essentially, when you have somebody who's criticizing you and you get triggered or something, your brain is throwing out the chemicals as if there was a lion chewing on your arm. So we're all overreactive biochemically. So the great thing is, because it's not psychological but biological, you can say, oh, I'm at brain state 5. And of course I feel this way because I have those chemicals charging, but I can clear them because EBT goes to the circuits that are causing them and switches them off.
I love it. I love the spiritual connection with this. And to me, it really resonates because I always talk about how when we learn how to take care of ourselves and we are able to feel more joy and express more joy, it really is radiating out to the world, and we're making the world a better place. So can you tell us what are some of the greater benefits of finding our joy, both for the world and spiritually?
Essentially, we are the circuits in our emotional brain. So whatever circuit is activated is going to be our physiology, our emotions, thoughts, behaviors, spirituality. What EBT allows us to do is, if we don't like the circuit that's running, not bother us, not blame ourselves, but essentially process it and switch it off. That means whatever aspect of your life that is not giving you the rewards that you truly want, when you come into EBT, you identify those circuits and turn them off. It's not about me or any guru or any therapist. It is about you having tools that allow your emotional brain to make your dreams come true.
Oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. Okay, you've sold the app. Great. So I'm definitely going to be downloading that ASAP. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to try this out and test it out for myself and see how it goes. But thank you so much for all the work that you've done over all of these years and how much time and effort you've put into this. I can tell you're very passionate. I want to ask you a few personal questions.
Okay?
What do you wish more people knew?
That we're inherently strong and good and wise. So one of my favorite quotes in one of my first books was, on the day you were born, you had all the inherent strength, goodness, and wisdom you ever needed to solve any problems. All you required were the tools to access it, the tools to access your emotional brain. And from there on, you'll see your strength and your goodness and your wisdom right on the spot.
Oh my goodness, so beautiful. How do you define success in this lifetime?
That's interesting because we give groups. EBT is about being on the telephone, being in groups, being with others to catch their joy and inspiration. And someone said to me, I wish I were you because you know what your purpose is. Your purpose is EBT. And I started laughing. And I said, are you kidding me? My purpose is not EBT. My purpose is to use, now my older thinking brain to connect with my body, to spiral up to that state of connection where I can essentially connect in this moment with the deepest part of myself and do whatever I need to do to follow my spiritual path. because it's going to be different every moment. And I have to be truly alive to my experience. So essentially, if I can do that, stay connected, at least most of the time, not all, then what I'll do is I'll let my life unfold the way it should.
I love that. Yeah, I think that can be very frustrating to some people to feel like, okay, I have to have this one purpose and this one thing I have to accomplish. So the way that you're framing it and the way that you're explaining it, I think that feels much more open and liberating to not feel like, okay, what is my one thing I have to do in this life? I love that. So speaking of things, is there a goal or a dream that has evaded you or something that you have left on your bucket list that you'd be willing to share with us?
I do. I do. And at first, I would say bringing EBT to children, because it started with children. And right now, we have a crisis in the United States because the most stressed population is the youngest. And these skills should be in every school system. They should be in every family and in every pediatrician's office, as well as for adults. But on a very personal level, I've worked hard. I have 3 children. I had 4, one passed away. And I now have children that are having having their children. And I'd like to spend more time with them, not just over the video, not from afar, but I'd like to do more hands-on to help my children raise their children, and because I had such a hard time in life for that. So I'd like to give more to my grandchildren and my children as the worker bee, maybe doing their dishes, or doing something. That's a real indulgence, to be able to be there for the grandchildren as they grow up.
Isn't that interesting? I really feel like, I'm 44 and my kids are 14 and 19. And I already feel myself imagining the years ahead where I'm the helper, because it's funny because as a parent of my own children, that just sounded like awful. Like, oh, there's so many chores and there's so many things. It is too much. But whenever you put yourself into that different perspective, it just feels different. And believe me, as parents, we appreciate it so much. So thank you for all of the work and the help. And I can't wait to be in that position as well someday where I can be the helper and, help raise those grandkids and help them learn about the brain and connecting to their bodies and the spirituality. So you have so much lovely wisdom to share with them. It's such a gift that you will be giving to them. What does it mean to be human?
What it means to be human. It means, I don't know if I can say this, but I'll say it my own truth. It means you're under God's grace. There is grace in this world, that we have the brain that is so magnificent that we can open our hearts to transcendent experiences just by using our brain wisely. So we have the ability to be very, very bad and to do the wrong thing, but to be able to process whatever we do back to that state of connection and where we feel love, compassion, gratitude, hope, forgiveness, awe, and joy. We have a brain that can do that, as well as being really bad, doing really stupid things, having crazy circuits in our brain that we have to get rid of. So I would say that to be human is to embrace all of life, not just the goodness in life, but the downside of life, because you don't really love life until you see it as whole and accept it as it is and rejoice.
Wow. Wow. Profound. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, so tell us, where can we connect with you? How can we get the app? Tell us all the details.
The details are the most important thing. We have books, and we have a brand new book on 1, 2, 3 joy. So if you're struggling with eating and weight, thinking of using injections, consider using your brain to give yourself the chemicals that will turn off those drives. And then if you need the drugs, take them, but do the natural approach. 1, 2, 3 joy, and that's on Amazon. Another thing is, the most important is, there's no substitute for trying this method. And because of the gift from our patron, it only costs $1 to join the EBT community. We don't give out the app without training because it doesn't work. You have to learn how to use it. You have to learn how to connect with yourself. And so every single day of the year, there is a provider there. All you have to do is call in the phone, and you can hear people spiraling up. You can have all your questions answered, and you can get started with it. So go to ebt.org. Notice what it says is, do you want more control over your life? And who doesn't want more control? Download the app. Start coming in. On Tuesdays and Wednesday nights, you can talk to me on Zoom. Every day of the week, you have someone who will listen to you, and you can start to go through our courses so you can learn how to spiral up and raise your set point so you're not wired for stress, but you're wired for joy. It's at ebt.org. So think of food stamps, EBT, Emotional Brain Training.org.
Beautiful. Okay, fantastic. And like I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. I'm going to try it because there's definitely areas in my life where I'm still struggling, where I'm staying in that state and I don't want to be there. So I'm going to learn how to use these techniques. Thank you so much, Dr. Laurel, for all the work you've put in to learn about this and create this and share this with the world. I really appreciate you and I'm very grateful for you. And I hope that you have a lovely time spending time with all of your grandchildren.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for everything that you do.
And thank you for all you do, how many people you give to. I am Dr. Laurel Mellin, and I am human.
Thank you for listening to another episode of I Am Human. I would be so honored if you subscribe to the podcast so that you never miss an episode. We love our listeners and take your feedback seriously. If you have questions or constructive feedback, you can email us at podcast@dryami.com. That's podcast@doctoryami.com. I am your host, Dr. Yami Cazorla-Lancaster. I Am Human is produced by myself and Alejandra Parra. Graphics designed by Alejandra Parra. Music by Angela Soph with Glowbox Productions and edited by the Castos production team. Remember, human, you are here for a reason. Have fun, explore, and live your life to the fullest.